Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Anthony Slater covers the Warriors for The Athletic. Our pleasure to welcome him in now. And Anthony, the news broke yesterday about the Jordan Poole trade about 20 minutes before our show, obviously sent us for quite a loop. Was this on your radar at all? Obviously, there was a lot of thought by how the playoffs went that Poole could be on the move this summer. But how quickly, from your vantage point, did this come together?
Yes, it was on my radar. The Warriors had kind of sniffed around on Chris Paul, actually going back to more than a week when he was on the Suns. And there was so much at play this time of year, and you had heard a lot. Like the Warriors were being really active in trade talks, and I did think there was somewhat of a wonder, at least from my side of things, if they were waiting for Chris Paul to maybe be released by the Suns. Right, that was an option before the Beal trade went down, and maybe they could get in like kind of the buyout market for him. But a lot of this trade is for financial reasons, which we can get into, but getting off the Poole contract. So I knew it was a possibility because there was about 25 things I knew were a possibility. I was a little surprised they pulled the trigger, and then to be honest, I was a little surprised they had to go up a I know it was 2030, it's top 20 protected first rounder. It's kind of a fake first rounder, but I was surprised that the draft assets are going with Poole to Washington instead of maybe with Paul.
Why do you say that?
I just think Poole is 24. He turned 24 last week. Yes, I know you would consider him overpaid right now, maybe coming off the disappointing playoffs he had, but he averaged 20.4 points per game last year. He averaged 25 as a starter. If you go back another season, he was incredible down the stretch of their title season. He had the most threes in the NBA in March and April when Steph sat. He was great in the playoffs. Go back and look at that first round series against the Nuggets the year they won the title. He was like the best player on the floor. Go to game one in Memphis of the second round, maybe, their biggest West playoffs win of that title run. He had 31 when Draymond Green got ejected. He was, again, their best player in that game. Like, there's a lot of high upside with him. And I understand the contract, but I'm a little surprised they had to give up a mini asset to, get off of it.
Yeah. I want to circle back to Poole in a second. Anthony Slater, Warriors beat reporter for The Athletic, is with us here on the Team 980. But I am curious because we had Bonte Hill, who I'm sure you're familiar with out there in the Bay Area, on the show yesterday, and it was still pretty fresh. He was like on the ledge about bringing in Chris Paul for the Warriors. He hated it. What do you think? You also have the benefit of it not being quite as fresh. What do you think of the fit for the Warriors who are trying to extend this championship window?
Well, I think it's fine. I think it's veteran-driven and coaching-driven. Steve Kerr is excited about this move. Steve Kerr is obsessed with having traditional point guards, and he, bemoans the loss of, like, Sean Livingston and, like, prime Andre Iguodala, or late prime, we'll say Andre Iguodala. But, the guys who can settle everything down. He used to call Andre Iguodala the chaperone of the team, right? The Warriors play a hectic, crazy style. They're incredibly turnover-prone. Steph Curry is their point guard, but Steph Curry's whipping, over the shoulder passes, and Klay Thompson's jacking up wild shots, and it's what makes them great. But it also is what makes Steve Kerr pull his hair out on the sidelines. Like, he really wants a traditional point guard, and they literally probably just got like the most traditional point guard in NBA history. So I think there is an excitement level from, like I said, a coaching standpoint, and Steph Curry was involved in these conversations. Even Draymond Green, who's not technically coming back to the Warriors quite yet, they still have to work out a contract. He's kind of involved in the behind the scenes process. So I get it from that standpoint. They're going for next year's title, and there's a belief come May next year, second round, Chris Paul being available to them as a third guard instead of Jordan Poole, who was frantic and bad for them in the playoffs this past year, they believe makes them more of a contender. But I also am like, Jordan Poole played 82 games last season. Like I said, he averaged 25 as a starter. He was durable and a good fill-in when Steph and Klay missed games. They're going to miss games again. Regular season games matter for a team fighting for standings. And I just think they got worse in the regular season because who's to say Chris Paul is not also missing a lot of the games that Steph and Klay are missing. So I think it's a very risky.
That's a good way to put it. But it does seem like potentially it's better in the playoffs. It just depends on which Poole you get. The one from 2 years ago or the one from last year, obviously, which brings us to Jordan Poole. What do you expect from him? He'll be the number one option here offensively this season. Still TBD on who exactly is around him. But knowing that I don't think they're going to bring in anyone who's going to take more shots than him. Like, what do you imagine Jordan Poole being in Washington without some of the pressure? Because obviously this is not a team that is remotely close to championship contention. Some would probably say, and correctly, that they're not remotely close to playoff contention right now. So what does Jordan Poole look like in that atmosphere, in that environment?
He's going to be really fun, I think, for Wizards fans. He plays a non-boring style, which will include games where he has 7 turnovers and takes 4 heat checks he shouldn't, including 29-footers. I mean, I'm sure you watched him plenty, during the last couple of playoff runs. Like, he's a wild, confident player that at times can be extremely inefficient. And, I think he was 5th in total turnovers this past year in the entire NBA, despite, being a bench player half the time. And, he only shot 34% from 3. And I think a lot of that shot selection, I think he is a 39% type 3-point shooter. Just, watch him in warmups. If you're going to games out there in Washington, you bet, man, this guy's a pretty elite shooter. He just kind of takes crazy looks and he can go on cold streaks, but he can get really hot. I mentioned March and April. This is 2 seasons ago. Steph injures his foot. Poole plays the last 21 games, something like that without Steph. He hit 85 threes over that stretch on 45% shooting. I mean, he basically turned into prime Damian Lillard from 3 for a pretty, lengthy stretch. And he can do that. And he is a highlight passer. He's not Chris Paul, again, from a traditional, I'm going to table set, I'm going to get my guys the ball where they want to, but he might run a pick and roll and throw between the legs, pass that, sometimes it goes out of bounds. Sometimes it's perfectly to somebody for an alley-oop. And I think there's going to be nights, especially from my side, not watching the Wizards on a nightly basis. I'm going to pull up my phone and be like, man, Poole's got 47 tonight. But there's also going to be nights where you're watching it and you're like, oh, Poole's 2 of 13 from 3 and just kind of shot him out of the game, which I think is okay for where the Wizards are, right? I think they need a fun, high-usage player next year, and I think they actually got a pretty good one.
Right. No, 100%. He's more exciting than any player they've had since John left. He's, Beal, while efficient and, everyone knows what Bradley is, exciting was not part of the package there. So I'm excited to watch him. I low key kind of want them to re-sign Kuzma now. Just let's go try to score 140 every game and not care about defense and see what happens. Cause I actually don't care if they win this year. And, unfortunately that has been a little bit of Poole's problem, the not caring about the defense thing. What are we talking about in terms of his mentality, in terms of his ability to be a self-starter, to continue to do the work that he's going to need to do to get better as a player while not being in that hyper-competitive championship goal type of environment that we had in that he had in Golden State?
Yeah, work ethic is not a problem. It is what made him with the Warriors. He's 28th pick. He had a really bad rookie year. He's one of the worst players in the league. Some people in the organization have basically given up on him, but he just grinded like he's an insane from a work ethic standpoint. Made himself much better. Got in the gym, made himself much stronger. Got an NBA body, got more NBA athleticism. Suddenly came back, and his jumping ability, his quick first step, his power at the rim. His first year he couldn't finish anything at the rim because he was just getting knocked around. So he will work like crazy, and I do not think that's environment dependent. I think he is going to be very motivated in Washington. He wants to show the Warriors and the rest of the league he's worth the contract, and he's worth the pecking order jump that he's about to make to become kind of a lead option. He thinks that's what he is. I think that's part of why this trade went down, because he's a little frustrated not being that with the Warriors. But from a defensive standpoint, he's not physical. That's a problem that the Warriors always had. He doesn't get in the mix. He doesn't, crack back on, when the pick and roll coverage asks for him to come back on the weak side. He can just kind of get a little bit lost out there. I don't think that's a work ethic thing. I think that's just kind of a want to on defense. He's a flashy offensive player that never has obsessed too much on that end. Also, he's a little bit slight for a guard in the league. He gets targeted, he gets picked on. Wings can get him on switches. There's going to be plenty of that. But you talk to coaches and people with the Warriors, they've always thought long term he could have, if he wanted it, if he had the desire, he could have somewhat of a Steph Curry arc on it from a defensive standpoint. Steph Curry was skinnier and bad early in his career, but every single year got older, got stronger, got wiser, and got better. And you would now say Steph Curry, despite still being, relatively small by NBA standards, is a solid defensive player, good enough. There was a belief from the Warriors he could get good enough if he wanted to. We'll see if that plays out in Washington.
Yeah, definitely. Anthony Slater covers the Warriors for The Athletic with us here for just another minute or two on the Team 980. From my vantage point, Anthony, the most important thing that can happen here in Washington is the culture starts to get built. Michael Winger obviously coming in from LA, Will Dawkins from Oklahoma City. They start to build these structures and the type of thing that the Warriors have built as an organization out there. Obviously, that will trickle down to the coaching staff, which will either do that successfully or be gone in a year, because that's how these things work, and ultimately the players. And that gets me to kind of the last question I have about Poole before I want to ask you real quick about the two other guys that they got in the trade. But how is Poole going to be from that aspect? Do you think he's at a point in his career where he can genuinely take the things he learned in Golden State and bring them to Washington, or is he still a little green on that, not quite at that leadership level?
I think it'll be good. I think having a young team without winning, champion expectations will be good in a sense, because I don't think he's ready to be a 1A on a 4 seed or something in the East. But I do think he does have kind of a gravitational pull to him, especially when he's playing well. They had the whole pool party thing. I mean, the fans kind of turned on him during last year's playoffs or last season, and it went south for several reasons. We haven't mentioned the Draymond Green punch, which sits under the surface of all this.
Sure.
But when he's hot and when he's going well and when he's shooting well, the crowd can get into it. I mean, again, a fun style, and he can be a very fun personality that I think will be followed, and confident and cocky, and sometimes in a good way. But I think it's with him, it's a little dependent on how he's playing. So when he's going through slumps, sometimes he can, pout, however you want to put it, but which isn't sometimes great for young teams. But I think that's, young leaders learn that way. To be honest, to your original question, I do think he will take a lot of lessons that he learned. How can you not from being around Steph Curry, who is about as incredible a franchise face that there is in the sport. So he saw that up close. I know he kind of absorbed it. So I think that really helps him. But he's not going to be I don't think the perfect leader year one for them, but I do think he's going to have a personality that Wizards fans kind of click with, especially with such low stakes. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, I'm curious as much as the fans, who I think will enjoy that entertaining style, the kind of the relationships he develops in the locker room. Is he a guy that's holding others to a high standard? It's going to be interesting. We'll see. All right, the two other guys they get, Ryan Rollins, they get Baldwin Jr. as well. What's kind of the scouting report? What were people in the organization in Golden State saying about them? Two guys that, for everything I've heard, they had pretty high expectations for, but ultimately Washington is able to pry away.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, those from a Warriors perspective, those were clearing roster spots and money. The Rollins they bought into the second round last year, got him 44th overall. They talked about kind of bigger guard with longer term upside, but he was just very unready to be in an NBA rotation, and then couldn't play his first summer league because he had a fracture in his foot. It healed. He played, most of the year in the G League, was never in the rotation. And then, the fracture kind of reappeared and he had to get surgery, and he missed the last, he wouldn't have played, but he missed the last 3 months. So to me, maybe the Wizards might have time for him, because they might have time for anybody at this point,
right.
But far away from being a legitimate, NBA rotation guard. He has a, raw skill set that maybe one day, but he needs a lot of time. Baldwin is much more intriguing. 28th overall, former top level, in the Chet Holmgren draft. If you go back to when they were all in high school, he was right up there with Chet Holmgren and Paulo Banchero as far as a prospect. He had a bad ankle injury in high school that really never healed. Bad 1 year in college, playing for his dad actually at UW Milwaukee. And they had to really rehab his ankle once they drafted him and got him in. But he would kind of, in certain nights when their front court was depleted last season, he would kind of peek his way into the rotation. That guy can really shoot it. There's going to be some times next season with the Wizards, he's 6'11", super tall, super lengthy, super skilled, smooth. He's going to come off the bench and hit 4 threes in a quarter. and it's going to look like Michael Porter Jr. almost out there at times. But also, like, the body hasn't been NBA ready. The durability is a big question mark. Again, like the ankle, it's still like kind of being rehabbed back to full health. And the Warriors just decided they wanted Trace Jackson Davis from Indiana, who's a 23-year-old, in that spot for cheaper rather than Patrick Baldwin Jr. That's why they made the swap there, as part of the grander move. And but I would say of the two, Baldwin will intrigue Wizards fans much more.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And, like you said, Wizards got time for anybody right now. So let's see if they can fix this player development issue that they've had for years and years here. Anthony Slater, always really enjoyed reading your work from afar. Great to have you on the show. Hope we have an excuse to do it in the future. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks for having me.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.